I'll be impressed. First off, I'd promote him right away.
So let's say you're asking these questions and you're saying to somebody, why won't this work? And that somebody says to you, well, Joe, it's because of you. It's because how you're handling it. How do you handle that as a leader? If they actually go down that road and say those words to you.
They got a lot of nerve to say that to the boss. I'll be impressed. First off, I'd promote him right away. I'd say, okay.
I'm right there with you, man.
I tell you, buddy, you're my assistant from now on, my number 2 or my chief of staff, whatever. I need you next to me, whispering in my ear every minute of my life. But that takes humility. You just said it. But if you're really a good listener, you have to be humble enough to know you don't know all the answers.
So we talk a lot on this show about leadership, the different styles of leadership, being a servant leader, being a dominant leader. You know, there's good, bad, perceived good, bad. There's all these different things and avenues and ins and outs when it comes to leadership, especially in the blue-collar skilled trades, trying to run, grow, and scale your business while also trying to maintain your life at home and, you know, your network and your social circles, and all this stuff ties directly back to leadership. So I love having people on the show that can speak directly to this, especially through a very unique lens. So, Joe, we got to talking before the show, and I'm really excited about the perspective that you have. You wrote the book on leadership, The Generous Leader, right? So welcome to the show, man. I mean, just how are you?
Well, thank you. This is fun to be here, and I'm very well. It's summertime. I'm in northern Minnesota. I got 8 grandchildren here with me for the summer, or, you know, 5 or 6 weeks of it, which is in my mind just heaven on earth. So I'm pretty good. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, you know, we'll get into who you are and why you wrote the book and all of that stuff. But I have a very specific question for you that you probably heard 8 billion times, but I really just want your take on it. Are leaders born or are they made?
You know, I mean, sure, heard 1 million times and there's 1 million books, so I guess I can't be wrong. But if you really ask me to think about that in my observations over time, and maybe there's some born stuff, I don't know, but I think you grow and you develop into the leader you become. And I think that's made. I really believe that. And it might start with your parents, hopefully, you know, but who knows what mentors or experiences throughout your life in whatever work you do or whatever roles you play. You know, I think you're going to grow into your leadership. So maybe you're born with the start. I don't know, but you definitely grow into it. I know that. You evolve and you change. I believe that.
Awesome. Well, that's really great news, I think, for a lot of people that listen to this show, especially the ones that don't feel like they might have natural leadership ability. I've seen that 1,000 times, people coming up to me saying, Josh, man, I'm not a leader. You know, what am I doing? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we do, would you mind just kind of introducing yourself and telling our audience who you are, kind of what your background is, and why you're here?
So, name's Joe Davis. You got that. I am 67 years old. It doesn't matter. I had a long career with Boston Consulting Group, a white-collar consulting firms. Feel interesting related to this. First 6 years of my life was Procter & Gamble sales rep, which was quite an interesting experience in and out of grocery stores, trying to convince managers to put Head & Shoulders and Crest toothpaste on the shelf. You know, I think obviously I'm here with you today because I did write a book at the end of my time at BCG on some of my observations of leadership. And I had the great fortune to interview a number of other leaders and ask them. Now, this all in the theme of a generous type of leader, which I'm sure we'll talk about. This is not, you said the word dominant a minute ago. That's an interesting word. But this is, depending on what that word means, I guess a generous leader can still be very dominant, but there's a little angle that I argue is very important.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by telling me why you felt like you needed to write a book?
That's a good question. There was a handful of reasons. I mean, one, a number of my colleagues coming out of COVID said, hey, you ought to write about leadership and what you observed during that time and what you did. I was leading BCG North America. And I actually wrote like 38,000 words really fast after I stepped out of the role and shared it with a publisher who said, so I skimmed it and it's really good, but no book. So what do you mean? And she said, well, nobody will want to read about COVID a couple of years later. It takes them, as you know, Josh, a couple of years to get a book out.
Yeah.
So I still did want to, so I still wanted to send the message I think is important on leadership. And, I had other reasons. I was leaving BCG. I thought it'd be cool to write something, maybe give me a path after work, traditional work. But the other thing, and most importantly, I had a friend of mine. I said, I'm going to write this book. And, Brené Brown, she writes the authenticity books and sells 1 million copies, 2 million copies, and
Yeah.
Adam Grant, whatever. I said, who's going to read my book? He said, Joe, it doesn't matter. If you can move 8 people to change their leadership style, you should consider it a success. Now, as you and I both know, writing a book is actually a lot of work. So I now have aspirations to move more than 8, given the effort I put into it. But I think at the end of the day, that really, as time goes on, is why I wrote it. I thought, okay, I can put my message out there too, and my beliefs, and those that want to read it will read it.
That's amazing. So I guess that begs the question, what do you want to move those 8 people toward?
Yeah. Well, you said the word servant leader and those things kind of thing. I use the word generous leader. And a couple of points I'll make real quick. First of all, it's not, generous leader does not mean give high paychecks. And if you can afford to do that, that's a great thing. Nobody's going to begrudge you. But
Thanks for the clarification there, man.
That is not the person that people want to follow. You made the point about, say, people say, well, I don't. So, and also the other thing I'll very importantly is, a leader, it's not all about the heart. As a colleague, a friend of mine, a CEO said, Joe, as a leader, you never have to forget outcomes matter. You do have to drive results. And that's the important thing. Now, his argument was the sooner you move past yourself and unlock all the great traits and human traits in the people you work with, the sooner you will get to the greatest outcomes. So that's what I'm really pushing is that, I think an exceptional leader, the way I define generous leader, and I'll also say you still have to be a good manager. You have to set plans. I'm not saying that stuff. This is a step beyond that. If you got to work on the basics yourself. Or there's plenty of books on management. But really is someone who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit so that others grow, thrive, and develop to their full potential. That's what a great leader does. And, when you said something, we can talk about that statement. I'm not a good leader because I'd have some counsel on that. But, and the funny thing about that is if you're really ensuring, not funny, the bonus to it, if you're ensuring everybody's thriving at their full potential, you're going to win too, right? I mean, the organization's going to do well, your team's going to do well, the outcomes will be great. And usually the leader gets credit for helping the team to get there or for getting there. So it's, I do not believe that if that is your reason for helping others to get better, all about only you, they see through it, they smell it, they won't follow you anywhere. But if it's really what you're doing as a leader, you're going to help them thrive. You and your organization, your team are going to win.
Wow, that's a very, very good description of that. Probably one of the better ones that I've heard. So I've got to ask, where's the balance? Where's the balance between expectations for yourself as a leader, right, and what you hope to achieve, between the expectation you have for others, or maybe expectation is not the right word, but how do you balance the two to make sure you're still moving forward in a way that serves you and others? Well,
yeah, I'm going to have to interpret your question a little bit, because I actually would argue if the whole thing's moving forward, then you're moving forward. As far as we're talking about your own development, we can talk about that separately. And when you say the word balance, often people say, well, is it just being nice? I think, when I described what I thought that the best leaders do, what they're doing is actually caring about you doing well. They're going to benefit, but they care. If they don't care at all, it's really hard to help people move. And, so caring also doesn't mean it's only being sweet all the time. I can tell you, well, here's an issue. Well, I'll just tell you some feedback I got once.
Sure.
My manager or my boss said, Joe, I could put 2 people in a room, 4 walls, no door, no windows, and give you a very tough problem. And you don't get out unless you get the problem solved. And this other guy that worked with me, named Philip, he'd get out of the room every time. You might not ever get out of the room. Whoa, that was okay. So I guess I'm not smart enough. But he said, however, then when you're out of the room and you've got to now execute and deliver on whatever that brilliant idea was, he will never deliver, and you will deliver 100% of the time. because you understand where your shortcomings are. You know, you surround your people, you're collaborative, et cetera, et cetera. So that wasn't being nice. He kind of told me, hey, buddy, you're not the smartest guy in the room. But he also said, to use a word that's kind of common now, your superpower is teaming, collaborating, leveraging others. So, the balance, when you say the word balance, I know what you mean. But, if the goal is to push people to be the best they can be, it's, you got to give feedback. You got to give in the moment. You got to be direct. You got to be honest. You have to do it with thought. So and I could go on and on with stories of, you know, tough feedback, which, I mean, one time I let somebody go in the room, the review room, and said, well, you can't, he's a good guy. I said, no, he's a good guy. And that's why I'm letting him go. So what do you mean? I said, he doesn't fit here. He's not happy. We're not doing him any good. Well, that's mean. I said, no, letting him work here is mean. He's going to end. Of course, the guy left and went on to great things because he went to where he belonged. It didn't belong. He belonged personally, but where he fit better, could thrive.
Yeah, and when you put it that way, right? It's right or wrong, nice or mean. That's really subjective, right? And
Yeah.
probably very much of it is circumstantial as well. I've got a little Post-it note up in my office, and all it says is "candor is kindness." Right? Because
Yes.
to your point, you can't best serve somebody unless you're being honest with them, and sometimes that feedback, if it's honest, it's not always nice. I mean, or what could be interpreted as nice, right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, nice isn't even the relevant word because if it's
Right.
honest, this is now, if you're doing it well, you do it in the moment as best you can. You don't wait for the end of the year. You say, hey, these three things you did great, and and these are the strengths you can use to leverage. You do help them to get better, but you're direct. No, I always say, don't give mush feedback. I can remember another story. One time, a person was not going to get promoted, and I was the head of the office, and this person was there, and it was a woman, it doesn't matter, but it was a woman, his reviewer. And she started giving him feedback and blah, blah. And we were telling him, you're not going to make it. It's an up or out place. So he's losing his job. Well, she went on for, I don't know, 6 minutes. And it was, even I said, what are you saying? Finally, he looked over at me. He said, Joe, am I being fired? And I said, yes. And he said, thank you. So one sentence, one word, and two words, and the whole thing was communicated. And you call it nice, you call that mean as hell. He actually thanked me because he was confused. What is going on here? Am I losing my job?
Wow. Yeah, and that's really interesting too. Because I think it's so easy, and I know this from personal experience, right? It's so easy to get wrapped up. You don't want to be perceived as somebody who's being mean or being a jerk or being a bad leader by delivering this type of feedback. But in so many ways, you're sealing your own fate by beating around the bush. So it's really interesting.
And
I
you're
want to.
sealing theirs.
Yeah, go
Well, I
ahead.
guess you're sealing theirs, in which case you're sealing yours, right? It's a
Exactly. All right, Joe.
can
So
I
we've
tell you
been
one other
talking for.
story? Oh, do you want to move on?
Oh no, go
Can I
ahead.
tell you one other story on
Yeah,
this?
please.
It just was it's 20, started off Procter & Gamble, as I said, sales rep, and got promoted to manager. I had three people working for me. They were all in their 40s. I was 24, 25. So they were like, I was scared to death. You know what I mean? And I would ride with them every week or every 2 weeks. And I never gave feedback, basically because I was scared. Who am I to tell this person to do? And then it came to the year in review, and I wrote all this stuff down that this one guy should do based on the manual in my 2 years, and started to deliver the feedback. And he looked up. He said, "Wait a minute, maybe 2 minutes." He said, "What the blank, Joe? You ride with me every 2 weeks, and you've never said any of this. What the hell have you been doing?" And it was cinch because it was all my problem. He was actually,
Yeah.
interestingly, he was looking to see what the young whippersnapper might be able to tell him to be better. He was looking for it, and I was scared for an entire year. To your point about, you get caught in your own head, you don't do anybody any favors.
Yeah, no kidding. So do you help leaders? Is this something that you do? Is this either a passion or a job, or I mean, is this something that you focus on?
Well, it's not. I don't focus on it to get paid for it. If you mean like,
Sure.
but at BCG, different. I mean, we serve clients and help the clients to deliver it, and at times have working closely with people about their leadership. But some people say, well, what do you think is the legacy after 30 plus years at a place? And it just worked. And what I look back on is people that call me up and say, Joe, I got this role, and it's this and that you said to me. change the trajectory. You just told me straight whatever. So I do believe over my career, it's a little bit too much about me, but the way I thought about most of it is how do I make sure you're great? How to make sure you're great? How to make sure you're great? And when you're all great, the organization's gonna be great. So you could argue, yes, that's what and I didn't think about it for a long time, but as time went on, I understood. Or people said, "My Joe, you're always stopping to think about how I can improve." Well, if you don't improve, I don't improve. So it seems pretty obvious to me. So if you ask that in the context of, am I a consultant that helps leaders? No, but I do like to help people grow to be the best they can be. And that's what I pushed pretty hard during my career.
Good. Well, and I think that's evident too through writing a book about leadership, being able to help all of those 8 people you talked about.
Yeah, right. No, I want your 800,000 listeners. I want 80 of them to change. Don't tell me how many you really have.
What's that?
I said, don't tell me how many listeners you really have.
I have 8. I have 8.
Oh, you have 8. Okay, well, we'll get them all. Get them all.
No, I appreciate that. So I guess, I'm curious because even I'm sure through the book and through your time at PCG, you probably had people coming up to you and asking you for advice on this kind of stuff. I'd be curious if there's anything that stood out as like the most difficult problem for a leader, or even let's narrow that down, maybe an emerging leader, a new leader. Is there anything that sticks out, like the one thing that's most difficult for them to overcome or get used to?
Well, gosh, I have more than one, but I will
Sure.
try to hit one. No, especially when you say the young leader. I think the problem with young leaders, not the problem, they're great. But the thing is, if you're a young leader and have 3 or 4 people working for you, if they're not delivering, you can actually do it all yourself. You might have to stay up all night. You might have to work but you can still do it. Now, once you have 30 people working for you, if you're still caught in that, oh, I can do it all because I haven't trusted them, I haven't empowered them, I haven't blah, 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 you're now in trouble because you can't do 30 people's worth overnight or over. So I think that's I think that's the number one thing I've seen is the stuff we talked about feedback. The newer leaders, either they're afraid or think they don't want to be beat up or whatever. So they're not growing the people as well as they can. They think they can get it all done themselves. They think they know better. They're not empowering the others. I think that is, I have other points, but I think that's probably the biggest thing. Because if you don't grow out of it, you're just not going to grow in your leadership. I guess you have your own company and just grow the company for whatever reason. You have the greatest products in the world. But my son has a company, and he's now at 12 employees, which not maybe a 27-year-old kid or 29. And he's I don't know if I think he might have read my book, but he does say, "Oh, Dad, I see why you're pushing me to think like this and think like that." Yeah. I said, "Yeah, buddy, you need those 12 to be humming. That's the way it works. You're smart, you got all that, but they have to hum. You can't hum by yourself."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? It's funny. I've lived this, right? I remember when I had 12 employees, and there's a big difference now. Still not huge, but I'm somewhere around 60 employees. But
there's a lot more than 12.
But there's stages, right? And it changes, and especially the leadership and what the company and the people need from me throughout those different stages of growth, which we'll get into in a minute. I am curious, what would you say to somebody to help them get past that feeling like they need to do it all, right? Or help them realize that leadership is about that appropriate delegation?
Yeah, well, there's 2 parts to your question, which is help them get past it. So that's in their own head versus I think the action I would take, and I'm maybe work backwards, is, just understand those 3 or 4 people. They want to do well too. They're there to team with you. They want things to hum. Now, and if they don't, then you have to outplace them or whatever, or get them a different role. I'm not saying, we talked earlier about being nice. And so the more respect you can show them, and they also know stuff you don't know. And the easiest way, therefore, to help them grow and to grow your business is to ask questions. And listen to the answer. Don't just, he said that, but that doesn't fit what I was thinking, or she said that, and dismiss it. But say, they think this and I think that. You put the 2 together. What does it mean? So I think the best action to take right off the bat is just ask questions all the time. What do you think, Wes? What do you think we should do? And if nothing else, they feel respected and bound to know something. Now, if you're so full of yourself, I can't help you, to your point. But maybe the counsel is you and I could just both tell you you're not going to grow in the role if you don't understand how to help them grow. I mean, um, and the other thing I would say, just like that 40-year-old person, they want you to help them grow. I didn't know that until he kind of swore at me a few times. I was like, whoa, this is, thank heaven someone told me that when I was 25. How lucky was I, right? So that's, probably how you get past it is just remember you don't know everything. The others really do want to be part of it with you. Eventually, you can't do it all by yourself. I mean, whatever hook it is for you. If you like to coach your kid's soccer team, you want to save some hours to go do that, and you better get your team really humming so you can walk out at whatever time, 2 o'clock. I don't know.
Yeah.
Find your hook. Find your hook.
Okay. Well, okay. So you mentioned questions. I really like to have this type of conversation. What types of questions is it that you're asking people, and how does that help you in a leadership role?
Well, I think the kind of questions you're asking is, what do they think about the situation, that whatever it is, and you just, I mean, I have 2 points. I always tell my teams in the consulting world, because we're trying to get clients to change, is, engage the skeptics and uncover the no's. Why won't this work? And odds are most noologists, it's not going to work. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 are a pain in the neck. But most of them know something you don't know. And if you don't learn that little thing, oh, guess what? It didn't work and somebody knew it. So if nothing else, hey, we want to do this and that. Anything you don't see it might work here, any place I'm off, any other ideas I'm missing. But I just think, it's a very easy question. What might be wrong with this plan? What might we not be able to do? So engage, not engage skeptics, but engage your team and uncover the no's. It's very easy, and that is absolutely helpful for you because that's what you're trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of all the no's, and your path leads to yes.
That's great. That reminds me of the book, Go for No. Sales sales aspect, right? But now you're kind of putting it back towards leadership. So, okay, so I'm just listening. You got my gears turning, and when my gears turn, I kind of try. I'll rapid fire, but I'll slow it down for our audience here. But okay, so I'm thinking of a situation, and this is going to pertain to humility. I imagine humility is part of leadership, part of servant leadership, part of being a generous leader, right? You got to be humble in many situations. So let's say you're asking these questions and you're saying to somebody, why won't this work? And that somebody says to you, well, Joe, it's because of you. It's because how you're handling it. How do you handle that as a leader? If they actually go down that road and say those words to you,
a lot of nerve to say that to the boss. I'll be impressed. First off, I'd promote him right away. I'd say, okay,
I'm right there with you, man.
I tell you, buddy, you're my assistant from now, or my number 2, or my chief of staff, whatever. I need you next to me, whispering in my ear every minute of my life. But that takes humility, to your point.
Yeah.
Well, 2 things. First off, in that situation for me, it'd be very simple. Oh, why? What am I doing? That's all. And I'd shut the blank up. What am I doing?
Yeah.
And let them talk. And the minute you get defensive, that's your problem. It's only your problem. And, if that's who you are, you have to figure out how to get past it because all you're doing is losing opportunities for others to help you get better. But building on this, I struggled with what's the number one thing because I didn't go to humility or humbleness or vulnerability, authenticity, whatever word you want. But that is essential. You cannot get people. I'm trying to think if I'm right about this. I mean, if you're in a position of massive power with a lot of weapons and shit like that, maybe you can shoot them, but you cannot get people to follow you really to the ends of the earth. Hypothetically, if they don't think you're authentic, they don't believe you acknowledge when you make mistakes, and not even not make mistakes, but just understand you don't know everything. People can smell. I'm sure I've had colleagues, or I don't think I've ever had a boss that thought they were perfect. A colleague who just thought he put an aura of everything's perfect. His kids were attractive, his wife was right, he was attractive, he was good at his job. Well, who can follow him? Because it's, my gosh, I can't keep up. What am I going to do wrong tomorrow next to this person? So this whole humbleness is critical. And sorry, well, you just said it, but if you're really a good listener, you have to be humble enough to know you don't know all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
well, you just can't be a good listener. A guy named Alex Gorski, who's the previous CEO of J&J, he said, the role of a leader is not to have the best answer in the room, but it's to get the best answer out of the room. I thought, what a clever, simple way to think about it. Okay, my job today is make sure all of us, somebody, I don't know who's going to come up with it, or we do it as a group, come up with the best damn answer.
I really like that. I'm glad that you shared that with me and with our audience. I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use it.
It's easy to remember,
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I'm glad that you expanded on that, because my next question was going to be, okay, so how do you get that person comfortable enough to say those words to you? Because, Joe, I know more leaders that are humble, but their team is, I don't want to say afraid, it seems like the wrong word, but maybe intimidated, too intimidated by the owner, the CEO, the executive, to have those super candid conversations upstream. No,
and it's I mean, you and I just don't kid each other. It's not easy. I mean, it's triple not easy. So there's, you can, if you run the company, you can put in mechanisms to invite it. I mean, the place where I worked, we had anonymous upward feedback. Now, it could be pretty damn harsh. The company's big enough, but it was, and then we measured, and the partners of the firm, on revenue and their upward feedback. And if either one of those things were off for 3 years in a row, you were gone, including your upward. Well, we got you all kinds of help. If your upward feedback was bad, coaches, and if we had to get you a psychologist, we got you a psychologist. But so one, you can build mechanisms. Two, you can do something which takes some humbleness, which is sit down with your team and say, hey, I want us all to thrive. I want this place to be great. And I want to be as great at, working with all you as I can. So I'm asking you now, if you see opportunities for feedback, I want to hear it. Or even better, I'm trying to work on this thing. So I'd love you all to help, and make it a simple thing. I'd love you all, if you observe me doing that thing one way or the other way, that you actually give me feedback on it. I'm really trying to work on that thing. And that's the simplest way to do it, actually. It got me thinking real time. I mean, you can put mechanisms in, but now you have to be, we just started with that. You've got to be humble enough to understand somebody else knows something that can make you better. But I mean, come on. If you're married, you probably know that, even if you want to admit it or not. Sorry to be mildly sexist, but I really do believe it.
Fair enough, though. I get what you're saying.
Told, hey, honey, I had a friend once that he just wasn't a very good listener at work, and we tell him that. But when finally he went to a doctor, and he discovered he had ADD, and he's like 45. And he said, they said I'm not a very good listener at work. And she goes, well, I could have told you that. I've been telling you that forever. You just never listened. Well, there you go.
Oh, that's amazing. So I would ask then, how much of the leader's success, or maybe it's a better question to ask, how much of the team's success depends on the leader's ability to invite that type of feedback?
Well, let me put it a different way. I think how much, I don't know mathematically, but I think if you ask me, there's being a very good listener, so you bring out everything the best you can, and this whole trait on humbleness or vulnerability are just so powerful, because the vulnerability part releases roadblocks for everybody. I'll tell a story. I asked someone, a colleague of mine, what's some of your vulnerable moments? This guy said, well, I just hate to admit I don't know something. He's a black male, so it's a little bit even trickier. I can't say I don't know something. And he said, if the team is I can tell they're stuck, and they're going to ask me like direction, help, and I don't know the answer, I'll leave before I'll get to ask questions. Now, how productive is that? Now your company's just, your team, whatever is not. And he said, so one day I stayed in the room. He said, I took a big breath, said, everybody, I don't know either. And he said it was stunning because the energy in the room just unleashed. Oh, you don't know too? You mean none of us know? Oh, well, let's all start solving it together. And you just unleashed your team by 3 simple words or 1 simple admission. So I don't know how much, when your point, how much, but I think it is quite valuable that you show some humbleness such that somebody is stuck. They can come to you and say, hey, I'm stuck. And you can together figure it out. Because having them, I don't know, most businesses, I'm sure it's time is the thing that's the biggest issue, right? Time cost. And so if someone's not doing their job for 3 days, you just lost 3 days. I once had a boss who I was doing some math thing and I was stuck, and I walked down the hall and asked him. He was a senior partner in my firm. He said, "Oh, I don't know how to do this either. Let's walk down the hall and ask Philip. He'll know." What a message to me that was. Now, he just was naturally that way. I thought, holy shit, he could have kicked me out of the room, walked down the hall himself, asked and called me back. He just said, I don't know either. It sent this freedom to me of, oh, it's okay to go ask when you're stuck. So, and that to me, you call it vulnerability, you call it humbleness, you call it whatever you want. It's common sense, maybe, to say you don't know when you don't. But man, it just frees your teams. It frees them.
Fair enough. So then, help me understand. Some pitfalls that leaders should be aware of, right? Maybe through their evolution into leadership, what should they watch out for?
Well, I think the first one, which we've said, is this hubris that you can do it all and or you know it all. I mean, that's the first pitfall. Or that, well, yeah, I think that because that happens more as you're younger versus, wisdom. If nothing else, age builds wisdom, and oh, wow, I didn't know much, and you know that later on. That's one big one. The other thing I think is this whole fear of feedback, and it goes both ways, which is someone's not really cutting it, and you have to let them go. Then you got to let them go. And, most people want to kind of be nice too. Oh, no, maybe I can help. But if they just can't get, and I say that because I remember my son, when he had to let his first person go, and I gave him counsel on how I would do it. Well, even then he said, oh, Dad, I was wishy-washy. I said, God damn it. Did you tell her it's not working out? Give her the reasons and close the door. Yeah. But that's another problem, I think, is also not, this whole feedback thing, but being afraid to make the moves you need to do. And that's easier as time goes. It's easier once you've done it once you've done it twice. That's a pitfall. We already talked about the feedback to help people grow and develop and the mushiness. That's a pitfall. The other thing, and then I don't know where this comes, but I remember during COVID, and you probably saw it too, a lot of leaders, the famous one is Arne Sorensen, the CEO of Marriott. He has a video, he's dying of cancer. And he gets on the video, he's bald because of the chemo and the radiation, all that. And he says, to everybody, we don't know where this is going. Unfortunately, I've taken a pay cut, everything a pay cut. I'm going to have to furlough the hotel. We don't fire you, but we have to furlough you. And we're going to make it through. We'll be here together. But I don't know when people are going to be back in the hotels. And Scott Kirby, CEO of United, was doing the same thing. And his team said, you can't tell them that. You're the boss. You have to have the answers. I said, well, what? Are you going to tell them when we're flying again? That's just a flat out lie. So I do think the other thing is, the moments of, which just takes learning too. When are the moments to be honest and say you don't have all the answers, but you still have to, be confident. You still have to instill confidence. You can't get up and say, oh my God, I don't want to fly. I don't know what the hotel, we might go out of business. Holy shit. God, I wish us all the best of luck. That isn't going to work, as opposed to, I'm not sure we're filling these hotels again, but we're here together and we're going to make it through and we're going to figure it out together. Oh, yeah. I'll follow that guy. So that's the other one is I once listened to a German CEO session, and he talked like, oh no, CEOs can never say they don't have the answers. And I just thought, buddy, I don't want to stereotype Germans, but I did stereotype my head that moment. I thought, buddy, you don't get it. Or maybe it's worked for you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you laying that out, and that resonates, because I remember when we were, our main demographic is restaurants. We do we do HVAC, refrigeration, and kitchen equipment repair for restaurants. So when COVID hit, now we were able to kind of maneuver a little bit. We, knock on wood, we didn't have to furlough anybody. We focused on the QSR, quick service restaurants that were still operating, but I remember through that time, my objective as the CEO of that company was to just let people know, even if I didn't know, right? So confidently tell them that I didn't know. So I would put out like an audio recording every week, every 2 weeks. And then, when we got to the latter end, it became every 3 weeks, then every month, but just saying, hey, listen, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when they're going to be able to open their doors again. I don't know any of that, but I do know that we can use this time to learn. We can use this time to grow. We can use this time to, invest into the resources. So when things open back up, we're going to be ready to hit the ground running, because people are going to have problems, and, we're going to be there to fix them. And I'll tell you, I did not know if that was going to work. like that came from a place of reaction. It didn't come from a place of strategy. Like I hadn't talked to Joe Davis first and said, "Hey, I have a great plan now." No, but it was an incredible learning experience for me because it truly shows exactly what you're talking about. The response from people was great. Nobody quit. Nobody got too scared. It was almost like, we all kind of understood that there was this big great unknown and we were all kind of in it together, and so it was a great feeling as a leader. And I think I can't speak for the team, but I would hope it was a great feeling as a team to be a team in that time as well. So good example there.
I'll bet your team felt very great. The thing is, you just said it wasn't a strategy, but you know what it was? It was your heart, I bet, and what's right and wrong. And to go there and lie to people is wrong. That's just a fact. Now, maybe sometimes you have a white lie to protect somebody. I get it. So we can argue, but to lie, and your heart was saying, wow, we're stuck. And I just got to lay it out with these folks.
Yeah.
But you also then had a strategy, which we're going to use this time to do blah, blah, blah. So it's not like, oh my gosh. So actually, there were some traits there that you went to naturally. I'm arguing. Right and wrong in your heart. I never thought of that till right now, but I think that's what happened.
You know what? Actually, I think you're spot on, because I think in that moment it was like, oh shit. I mean, really, that was it. I mean, that is all encompassing. Oh shit, my family. Oh shit, my team. Oh shit, my business. Yeah. All of it. And I think for me, at least, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, that inspires unity. And really leaning into what's right and what's wrong, because so much is wrong at that time. I've got to be the right, no matter what that looks like. So anyway, I mentioned that because I think there other people were probably in the same boat too.
It doesn't be a COVID crisis to do that.
Right.
It can't be right. If you come up there every time and say, I don't know what we're doing, well, eventually someone's going to fire you too, because
that's a good point.
Uncertainty are the times to do that, because everybody knows it's uncertain. The minute you start bullshitting them, sorry to swear, well, they're not dummies, or they shouldn't be working for you.
Agreed. So I want to touch on one more thing too before we wrap up or move toward the end. And this is something that I hear from a lot of leaders, actually probably more so young leaders than experienced leaders. But it's definitely a topic of conversation quite often. It was something I struggled with when I was a younger leader. And it's this premise of having difficult conversations, right? We kind of framed it before when we were talking as feedback, as candor, things like that. But there is this aversion to having difficult conversations because of how you're going to be viewed or what the reaction is going to be from somebody, or, unknown, all that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering, Joe, if you have any framework for, the leaders out there that may struggle with these types of conversations that you can share with them to help them through having them.
Yeah. It's this framework enough for you, but I do, even though I wasn't raised a consultant, but I do have some basic premises. I think the first thing is you have to care about them to some degree. And if you care, they'll know it. And then you can say whatever. You can't be an asshole, but you can say almost whatever. If it's coming from caring, they're going to say, okay, this person didn't pick the right word there and the right word there, but he or she meant well. And I actually would advise to young leaders, start that practice of, showing your team you see them as a human and you care about them growing and developing as early as you can. That trust is massive. The vulnerability, the I don't know. So, and then the next thing I'd say, though, when you have those conversations, you got to do a little bit of work. You got to sit down and think about, okay, what is it that they're not doing that I want them to do? What is it really? How do I say it clearly, as you and I talked about? Also, what are the things they're doing damn well? And I'm not, I've heard this like sandwich, good news, bad news, good news. I'm not saying that, but I am. And some people think it's silly. Some think it's fine. I don't care. But what it is they're great at stuff. How can they leverage that? So you have to sit there, okay, I'm going to have this tough conversation with Josh. So he's great at this. He's great at this. So Josh, you got to work on these three things. Boom, boom, boom. If you don't, you're out of a job or something's that. But I'll tell you, you got two traits here that are incredible. Boom, boom. I think, and then you work it through. So that would be my framework is, try to come from a place of caring. If you don't, it's going to be hard because they'll feel it. They'll tell you.
Yeah.
And then, think about what it is they need to do really and be able to clearly say it, and think about how any of their strengths they could leverage to make up for it. I mean, that's what that guy said to me when he said, you ain't smart enough to solve the problem by yourself, but man, you're great at teaming. Okay, get smart people around me. That was pretty, he didn't say that, but it was pretty clear advice,
Yeah, yeah.
And if you're going to be embarrassed, well, then I'll be stuck all the time. I mean,
I really
can
like
say all
that.
Now, when he told me that, I was a little hurt, but that's okay.
But now you know, right? And
I like the positive part,
Yeah.
but I thought, that's cool.
No, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that with me. And so that leads me into one more thing about this difficult conversations. The other thing I hear, right, is people struggling, and I'm raising my hand here too, right, with people struggling with how much specificity do you need when delivering this information? What kind of evidence, what kind of facts, what kind of homework do you have to bring to the table, or is you being the leader, is it enough for you to say, this isn't how I want it done?
Sorry, but if that's all you say, good luck to you. I mean, shame on you when they don't deliver. Maybe you fed that up to me, but that is the stupidest statement. You can say that. That's fine. But then you better have someone right behind you who knows how to help. What did he mean? How we go, well, he likes Tuesday to be on Wednesday. I don't know if you can change the calendar, but he wants you to change it. Like, what the fuck? On your specificity, the first thing I would say to that is it's better to do things in the moment when you see them. That was that feedback from my 40-year-old sales rep. Why the fuck, didn't you tell me when you ride with me? Shame on you, Joe Davis, even though you're my boss. He didn't say it that. He said it nicely. But so first off, in the moment, then you can say, hey, Josh, that podcast we did together, boom and boom and boom. Remember that? Yeah, of course, because we just hung up. Oh, wow. Well, what do you mean? And, you can process it. Now, the one caveat I give that is someone's really down, something really goes bad, don't go kick them then. So you got to be a human here. Like, this is not the moment to kick them. But if it's just, I had another colleague come out of a meeting. Well, actually, I'll tell this different story. I mean, we had come out of a meeting. He'd always say, well, how did I do, the boss? Right, we're really going to tell you. But then he'd say, okay, well, how do you think the meeting went? And then he'd give each of us feedback. It was a little harsh right front, but it was instant. But one time a fellow was presenting to the client, the executive team, and he said the word like all the time. And, if you say like to him, that's just, we talked about earlier, you could swear, but saying like all the time loses a little respect,
Yeah.
The client all left, we're in the room, and I said, hey, Alex, let me ask you a question. How old are you? He said, I'm 30. I said, 30-year-olds don't say like. Cut the fuck out. Get that word out of your book. And I said it right in front of the whole team. He goes like this. And he told me 5 years later, that was the most embarrassing moment of my life, but I never said like again. And I knew this was a moment to kick him, because he had to break that habit. So it was in the moment. It was embarrassing. He never forgot it. So I think, but it also came from, I wanted him to be great, and I knew he kept saying that.
And that's amazing, because what we did is we just brought this whole podcast full circle, because we opened this thing about being nice. Generous does not mean being nice.
Yeah, right. There was a good example on your
and
nice
that's
point.
a perfect example of somebody who said, wow, it was super embarrassing in the moment, but he never did it again. So some of the best advice I'm sure he ever got, because you're right, people don't want to hear people saying like all the time.
I'm already going to tune out. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it so ultimately that helped him, and that was kindness in its best form. So appreciate you saying that.
It takes a little finesse. Like, he just had a great meeting. He did very well. If it had been a horrible meeting, it wouldn't have been the moment to tell him. So no, I'm not telling you to march out there and start punching people. You got to think.
Fair enough.
The leader should be able to think that, this person's in a really. I had another boss that always said, hey, the minute you promote somebody, tell them everything they do that need to fix, because they're feeling so damn good. Their ears are wide open, Which I thought was interesting.
Oh, that's funny. All right, I got one more question for you, Joe, and then we'll move to close here. But I love to ask this question. I get all types of different answers, and one of the most helpful questions I ask on the show, and I know that because most of the people that reach out to me say, "Hey, I love what so-and-so said when you asked them that last question. And if you've heard any of the episodes, you know what I'm going to ask. But if you could share one piece of advice or wisdom that has the potential to transform the way a blue-collar business owner or any business owner thinks about success, growth, leadership, freedom, fulfillment, any of that, what would that advice be?
I think that advice is your organization, your thing is going to hum as your team hums. And so, your job is really ensuring they're all humming as best they can. You will benefit. That's probably what I think. And I don't care. You can be the soccer coach. You can be a mom or dad. Your kids are humming. It's not. I mean, this is actually kind of pretty basic advice. But my brother once said to me, "Oh, Joe, you live in this BCG world and you're all nice to each other." I don't buy that. I think no matter where you work, the employees want to grow and want to be better, and good managers and good leaders want to help them grow and be better because the whole thing works.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you so much. So where can people find you? Where can they find your book? Let us know.
Well, the book, of course, you find on Amazon. That's where I have a website, joedavis.com. You can reach me there. Also, if people want to leave me a message and connect, LinkedIn messages I do look at and I do respond. I'll give you my email and then I don't like to talk by LinkedIn messages, but I will respond. I don't have any secrets, so I'm more than happy to engage.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us and sharing that wisdom and insight with our audience.
Thanks, Josh. This was a lot of fun.
All right. Be well.
Thanks for listening to the Blue is the New White podcast. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. For more, please follow at Josh Zolan on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, or visit us at blueisthenewwhite.com, where we create success, not debt, and build blue-collar heroes.